Most people think learning works like this. Find a course, watch the lessons, take notes, finish the course, then move on to something else. It feels productive, but there's a problem. You can spend 30 hours learning something and still be unable to actually do it. That's because there's a difference between knowing about a skill and having the skill. And once you understand that difference, teaching yourself becomes much easier. Let's start with the first shift you need to make. Stop collecting information. When you decide to learn something new, your first instinct is usually to consume. You search for the best course, then the best book, then a YouTube playlist, then another explanation because the first one was too basic. 3 weeks later, you have 47 saved videos and almost nothing to show for it. The problem isn't lack of information, it's that you're learning without a target. Instead of asking, "What should I learn?" ask, "What do I want to be able to do?" Those two questions lead to completely different paths. Want to learn programming? Don't make the goal, understand JavaScript. Make the goal, build a website without copying a tutorial. Want to learn drawing? Don't make the goal, learn perspective. Make the goal, draw a room that actually looks three-dimensional. The skill becomes much easier to understand once you have something specific you're trying to produce. The next step is to learn just enough to start. This is where most people get stuck. They think they need to understand everything before they can begin. You don't. You need enough knowledge to take your first shot. That's it. Learn the basics, then try to do the thing, because the moment you try, you'll discover exactly what you don't know. And that is far more useful than randomly consuming information. Let's say you're learning video editing. You learn how cuts work, how audio works, how to add text, and how to use a few basic tools. Then you edit a 60-second video. Suddenly, you hit problems. Your pacing feels boring, your audio sounds flat, your cuts don't feel natural. Now, your next learning session has a purpose. You're not searching for how to become a better editor. You're searching for how do I make cuts feel faster without making the video annoying? That's real learning. The problem tells you what to study next. Then comes the most important shift of all. Use the project as your teacher. Don't treat practice as something you do after learning. Practice is where learning happens. When you're working on a real project, every mistake gives you a question. Every question gives you something to learn. And every time you solve one of those problems, the knowledge sticks because you actually needed it. This is why someone can watch 10 tutorials about coding and still struggle to build a simple app, while someone who spends that same time trying to build one app can become surprisingly competent. One person is studying the map, the other is actually walking. You also want to follow the 20% that gives you 80% of the results. You do not need to master every part of a subject. Most skills have a small set of fundamentals that create most of the practical results. When you're learning photography, you don't need to know the history of every camera. You need to understand light, composition, exposure, and how to actually use your camera. When you're learning programming, you don't need to memorize an entire language. You need to understand logic, data, functions, debugging, and how to build things. The goal isn't to become a walking encyclopedia. The goal is to become capable. Learn the fundamentals that let you do real work, then expand from there. Next, get feedback before you feel ready. This is the part people avoid because it's uncomfortable. You can spend months practicing alone and still have no idea how good you actually are. You need feedback. Publish the project. Show someone who knows more than you. Compare your work with people who are genuinely good at the skill. Then ask one simple question. What is the biggest thing holding this back? Not 10 things, one. Fix that, then ask again. That loop is insanely powerful. Make, get feedback, fix, repeat. That's how you turn effort into progress. You also need to learn how to find answers. When nobody is teaching you, this becomes one of the most valuable skills you can develop. At some point, you'll get stuck, you won't know what to do, and that's normal. The difference between a beginner and someone who's good at learning is what happens next. The beginner says, "I don't know how to do this." The self-taught person says, "I don't know how to do this yet. What exactly am I missing?" Then they search, they read documentation, they watch explanations, they test things, they ask better questions, they break the problem into smaller problems, and eventually they figure it out. You don't need to know everything. You need to become good at finding what you don't know. Finally, become comfortable being bad at something. This one sounds simple, but it changes everything. When you're learning a new skill, your first attempts will probably be bad. That's not proof that you're not talented. That's what being new looks like. Your first video might be boring, your first design might look amateur, your first program might be a complete mess. Good. That means you're actually doing the work. The people who become good aren't the people who avoid bad results. They're the people who can produce bad results long enough to eventually produce good ones. So here's the real advantage. Once you learn how to teach yourself, you stop depending on someone else to move forward. You don't need the perfect teacher. You don't need the perfect course. You don't need someone to tell you exactly what to do next. You can pick a skill, define the result, learn the basics, start building, find your weaknesses, and teach yourself what you're missing. That's a completely different way of learning, and it gives you something much more valuable than another completed course: independence. Because the most useful skill isn't knowing one subject, it's knowing how to become competent at almost anything. So the next time you want to learn something, don't ask, "Who can teach me this?" Ask, "What can I build? Where will I get stuck? And how can I figure out the part I don't know?" That's how you teach yourself. And once you can do that, you're no longer limited by what someone is willing to teach you.